My name is Brian. I thought I would share my experience in case it helps anyone who has been deceived by an unfaithful spouse. Let me tell you about my wife, Jessica. We were together for nearly 10 years, married for 8, and we have 2 wonderful children. Jessica always had a fiery temper and a sharp tongue. We had our disagreements, but I believe that was just part of marriage. However, things changed when she started becoming distant. Our conversations dwindled to single-word responses. Her phone was constantly in her hand, and she began staying out later than usual. Something felt off, so one night I decided to confront her. Jessica came out with the classic line, "I just do not feel a spark anymore." Initially, I felt guilty, thinking maybe I had not been as attentive as I should have been. But the next day, I found a text on her phone that was like a punch to the gut. It was a sappy, "I love you" message from a guy named Rick. My hands went cold as I scrolled through their messages, discovering months of planning their happily ever after. Instead of losing my cool, I took a deep breath and sought advice from others who had been through similar situations. I gathered evidence, consulted with a lawyer, and then calmly confronted her a few days later. I asked directly, "Are you seeing someone else?" After a long pause, Jessica confessed. She did not just admit to the affair. She went on about how she had a deep emotional connection with Rick and needed to see him one last time for closure. I told her, "If that is how you feel, pack a bag and go live with him." She called me every name in the book, but she stayed. Reluctantly, she half-heartedly ended things with Rick, but I could tell she was not committed. Even when she showed me a half-hearted text saying it was over, I knew she would find ways to keep in touch. I was at my limit, but our kids kept me cautious. I did not want to make things messier, but I felt I would end up filing for divorce. After that confrontation, we tried to maintain a facade for the kids. I told Jessica we needed marriage counseling if we had any chance of fixing things. She reluctantly agreed, but it was clear she was just going through the motions. The therapist was fair, highlighting areas for both of us to improve, but Jessica could not hide her irritation. She sighed heavily whenever discussing cutting off contact with Rick and rolled her eyes when she thought I was not looking. I laid down the ground rules. No contact with Rick, marriage counseling, and transparency. But Jessica resisted. She complained about needing closure with Rick and called me controlling for not allowing it. Every time I stood my ground, she made me feel like the villain. "You are overreacting," she would say. "Rick is just a friend." But friends do not send romantic messages and plan futures together, right? The counseling sessions did not achieve much. Jessica was often late, and her heart was not in it. When the counselor asked us to share our goals for the marriage, Jessica focused more on justifying her actions than on finding solutions. She would say things like, "I need my space," or "I do not feel the spark anymore," which sounded like convenient excuses to me. Meanwhile, I tried to keep it together for the kids. I wanted to be able to tell them I gave it my best effort, but deep down, I knew Jessica was still talking to Rick behind my back. Whenever I brought it up, she would dismiss it or become defensive. I knew I was not getting the full truth, especially when she got snippy if I glanced at her phone or asked where she had been. It was like she was determined to keep playing this game while stringing me along. I wanted stability for the kids, but Jessica's attitude was worsening daily. She found every excuse not to communicate with me and started living as if she were single again, separate from our family. I was torn between trying to save our family and accepting that this was not going to work. With marriage counseling failing and Jessica's loyalty still divided, I realized it was time to consult a lawyer again. I needed to protect myself and my kids, so I began filing the paperwork. I was angry and hurt, but I had to stay focused on keeping the house together for the children. Once I decided to file for divorce, I knew I had to be strategic about it. Given Jessica's unpredictable temper, I could not foresee how she would react. I wanted to shield the kids from any potential fallout, so I took my time to prepare, ensuring everything was in order with my attorney before breaking the news to Jessica. I kept my emotions in check, staying calm and collected for the sake of our children. The day came when I finally told her. Jessica was lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone like she had nothing to worry about. I sat down across from her, took a deep breath, and said, "Jessica, I am filing for divorce." Her eyes widened and she stared at me like I had slapped her. "What? Are you serious?" "As serious as I can be," I replied. "You broke the trust we had. I have done everything I can to keep our family together, but you just keep pushing me away. This is not going to work. Then the floodgates opened. Jessica launched into a full-blown tirade, calling me controlling, manipulative, and heartless. She told me I was a lousy husband and an even worse father. I stood my ground, letting her vent. She blamed me for everything she could think of: her unhappiness, our arguments, and even her affair with Rick. She twisted everything around to make herself look like the victim. Eventually, her yelling turned into sobs. She cried about how she did not know what she would do without me, how she could not imagine raising the kids on her own. But then, as if on cue, she switched tactics and insisted that Rick was the only one who understands her. I had to hold back my frustration as I told her, "If that is how you really feel, then maybe it is best you live with him." Jessica stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I knew she would be back eventually, but I was not sure how things would play out. I braced myself for the next few weeks, fully expecting her to make things as difficult as possible. But I was resolute. I was not backing down this time. When she returned a couple of hours later, she did not bring up Rick directly, but her icy demeanor said it all. We settled into an uneasy coexistence under the same roof, talking only about what was necessary for the kids. Over the next few days, I could tell Jessica was reaching out to Rick behind my back. Her phone was glued to her hand even more than before, and she would disappear into another room whenever she wanted to chat. It did not matter much at this point. I was focused on moving forward with the divorce. As we drifted into the tense silence of cohabiting strangers, I focused on setting up a game plan. I wanted to minimize the disruption to our kids' lives and give them as much stability as possible. My attorney and I worked out the paperwork for a fair custody arrangement, emphasizing shared holidays and enough time for me to be a present father. I wanted to be able to look my kids in the eye and say, "Your dad gave it everything he had." Meanwhile, Jessica's antics were as unpredictable as ever. One minute she would be begging me to reconsider, sobbing about how she needed our family to stay together. She would cry about how she made a mistake, how she could not bear to lose her husband and the father of her children. But the next minute, she was berating me for being emotionally unavailable and playing the victim with her friends and family. According to her, I had neglected her needs and pushed her away. It did not matter that she was the one who had violated the trust. We both knew she wanted to have her cake and eat it too, but Jessica was not done throwing curveballs just yet. As if she did not already have enough nerve, she decided to invite Rick to our daughter's birthday party. That is right, she thought it would be a good idea to have her lover show up at an event for our little girl, right there in front of her own family and mine. I could not believe her audacity. I confronted her about it and she brushed me off with a wave of her hand. "Oh, come on, Brian. It is not a big deal. He is just here to support me." "Support you?" I shot back. "How about supporting your daughter and her well-being?" "Do not make this about her," she snapped. "You just do not want him around because you cannot handle it." The audacity of her response stunned me. How she could so casually justify bringing Rick into our lives like that was beyond me. It felt like she wanted to twist the knife, to show me she could do whatever she pleased. I decided to skip the charade. Instead of attending the party, I planned a special day with our daughter the next day. We visited the zoo, enjoyed her favorite ice cream, and had a private picnic in her favorite park spot. She was thrilled, and her joy confirmed I had made the right choice. Meanwhile, Jessica's party with Rick did not go well. Word got back to me that it was awkward. Rick tried to blend in, but Jessica's family made their disapproval clear. My absence was noted, and some relatives murmured about how tasteless the whole situation was. Rick looked uncomfortable, clearly out of place among people who knew what he had done. The event was a fiasco, far from a normal family gathering. For the next few weeks, Jessica and I maintained an uneasy truce as the divorce papers moved through the courts. I arranged to move out once everything was settled and found a small rental nearby. It felt precarious, but I stayed focused on the future. I would create a new life for myself and my kids, free from Jessica's manipulative behavior. Living under the same roof as Jessica felt like walking on eggshells. We had to present a united front for the kids, but it was clear we were just waiting for the divorce to finalize. I moved to the spare bedroom, which felt like the final confirmation that our marriage was over. Despite the tension, I refused to let myself sink into despair. I needed to be strong for the kids and get my own life back on track. I threw myself into my work, hit the gym hard, and reconnected with old friends. They were my support system, reminding me that life could move on. As the divorce proceedings progressed, I discovered that Jessica and Rick were still seeing each other. She was even more secretive with her phone, and our daughter mentioned that Mommy's friend had been over a few times. I did not want to involve the kids in the drama, so I kept quiet, but I knew co-parenting with Jessica would be challenging, especially with Rick in the picture. During mediation, I pushed for a shared custody arrangement that ensured our kids spent time with both parents. Despite my anger towards Jessica, I wanted the kids to know they were still loved by both of us. It was a tough process, but we finally agreed on a plan that gave me weekends and a couple of weekdays every week. With the custody agreement in place, Jessica and I managed to keep things civil around the kids. We only spoke when necessary, discussing logistics like drop-offs, pickups, and school events. The kids sensed the tension, but I put on a brave face, hiding how much their mother's betrayal hurt me. Preparing to move out and start fresh, I found a cozy rental nearby. Moving day was chaotic, but it felt like shedding old skin. Standing in my new, empty apartment, I finally felt like I could breathe again. Settling into my new place was both a relief and a challenge. I finally had my own space, free from Jessica's manipulation. But the new place did not feel like home yet. There were no familiar smells, no kids' laughter. I left most of the furniture at the old house for the kids, so I was starting from scratch. The first weekend with my kids was a highlight. We had a pizza and movie night and built a blanket fort in the living room. They were excited about the new place, calling it an adventure. Seeing them happy reassured me that I had made the right decision. As weeks passed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I immersed myself in work, stuck to a gym routine, and even picked up fishing again. I wanted to rediscover parts of myself that had been lost during my tumultuous years with Jessica. The divorce was nearing finalization, and I began to see a glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel. Meanwhile, Jessica's relationship with Rick became the town's hot topic. Our mutual friends knew the whole story, and those who supported me were appalled at how openly Jessica flaunted her affair. Rick tried to act like a supportive partner, but he never seemed at ease around the kids. I did not waste energy worrying about them. I knew their relationship was built on unstable ground. During a visit with the kids, my daughter asked me why I had not been at her birthday party. I gently explained, "Sweetie, sometimes grown-ups do not get along, and it is better for them to have their own celebrations." She seemed satisfied with that answer and did not push further. With each passing day, I felt the weight of Jessica's betrayal lifting off my shoulders. I reconnected with old hobbies and even took a couple of weekend trips with the kids to the mountains. They laughed, played in the streams, and roasted marshmallows by the fire. Their resilience and strength gave me the courage to keep moving forward. When the divorce was finally official, I felt like a new man. I was no longer tied to a toxic marriage or constantly walking on eggshells. The paperwork was signed, and I was free. I had my kids, my health, and a fresh start. After the dust settled from the divorce, I focused on rebuilding my life. My new apartment began to feel like home, as I filled it with memories of the kids' visits. Their drawings hung on the fridge, and their laughter became a familiar melody on the weekends they stayed over. The living room became their playground, and my once empty walls were now decorated with their artwork and photos. Each day my world became a little brighter as I settled into a new rhythm. I was determined to make this new chapter meaningful. My attorney's final words still rang in my head. "Brian, you have your freedom now. Make the most of it." So I did. I picked up old hobbies like woodworking and fishing, and began taking better care of my health. I started running in the mornings and hitting the gym regularly. I found solace in creating things with my hands, whether it was a small bookshelf or a birdhouse. The tangible progress gave me a sense of control that I had not felt in a long time. I also began seeing a therapist to work through the emotional baggage left by Jessica's betrayal. I needed to process the pain, anger, and frustration that had festered inside me. The sessions were like a balm, helping me make sense of everything. I learned that I had a right to be angry, but holding on to that anger would only hold me back. Slowly but surely, I began to let go. As for Jessica and Rick, their relationship quickly became the town's entertainment. Rumors swirled about how things were not as perfect as they seemed. Rick tried hard to fit into his new role as a partner and a stepfather, but from what I heard, he was not fooling anyone. Jessica's family seemed to avoid talking about Rick, and at one family event, he awkwardly sat on the sidelines, unable to make conversation. Meanwhile, I kept my distance from their drama and focused on what mattered most. The kids were handling the separation well, and I wanted to ensure they felt loved and supported. We went on weekend trips to the zoo, had picnics in the park, and spent hours playing board games. Our board game collection grew, and Monopoly night became a cherished tradition. They quickly adjusted to our new routine, and I was grateful to see their smiles return. One afternoon, my son came up to me and said, "Dad, it is really nice here. Can we make this our clubhouse?" I laughed and agreed, telling him that it was his clubhouse as much as it was mine. It was those little moments that reminded me of what truly mattered. Despite all the chaos Jessica had brought into our lives, the kids and I were finding peace in our own little world. Over time, I even started to notice new possibilities. I was not in a rush to date again, but I slowly began to open up to the idea of meeting new people. A colleague invited me to a barbecue where I met a few friendly faces. I struck up a conversation with a woman who shared my love for fishing, and we exchanged numbers. We planned a friendly outing, but I was careful not to rush things. I knew I had to prioritize my kids and my own healing, but I felt a flicker of hope, a reminder that my story did not end with Jessica's betrayal. As time went on, my routine became more solidified. My weekends with the kids felt like precious jewels in the middle of a busy work week, and I loved nothing more than hearing their laughter fill my apartment. Their energy became contagious, and each new project we took on, whether it was building a birdhouse or baking cookies, became a cherished memory. Sarah and I gradually started spending more time together after meeting at the barbecue. She was easygoing, with a warm smile and a talent for making conversation. We kept things light initially, meeting for coffee or going for walks in the park. She listened without judgment as I shared my past, and she had her own stories about life's challenges. One evening, I decided it was time to introduce Sarah to my kids. I wanted them to feel included and understand that she was not there to replace their mother. We had a small picnic at a local park with sandwiches, lemonade, and a frisbee. The kids took to Sarah surprisingly well. She had a playful spirit that matched their energy, and soon they were running around, laughing and playing tag. After that day, I felt a shift in my heart. I knew I was not fully healed, but I began to see a future with Sarah. Our bond deepened as we explored hiking trails, tried new restaurants, and spent quiet evenings at my place. The kids often asked when Sarah would visit next, and it was clear they were comfortable having her around. Meanwhile, Jessica's relationship with Rick started to fall apart. Rick struggled with his role as a partner and stepfather, and Jessica and he often clashed over how to handle the kids. My daughter mentioned they would argue late into the night. When the kids came over to my place, they seemed tired and distant. I kept things positive, ensuring they felt safe and supported, but I could not help but worry. During one of our exchanges, Jessica's facade cracked. She was visibly upset as she handed the kids over to me. "Brian," she said, "I messed up. I realize that now." Her voice was strained, filled with regret and sadness, but I stayed calm. "It's too late for us, Jessica," I replied, my voice firm but steady. "All we can do now is focus on what's best for the kids." She nodded slowly, tears glistening in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered, then turned away. Jessica's acknowledgement of her mistakes felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders. It would not change the past, but it was a step towards healing for both of us. I remained committed to co-parenting civilly for the sake of our kids while continuing to build my new life. With time, life began to settle into a comforting rhythm. Sarah and I grew closer as a couple, and she became an integral part of my family's life. We made a habit of doing small things together, cooking meals as a team, taking evening walks, and enjoying weekend trips with the kids. Our home became a sanctuary filled with laughter and warmth. Even the kids' friends enjoyed coming over to hang out. Jessica, meanwhile, was adjusting to life after her breakup with Rick. Our co-parenting became more consistent and respectful, with both of us agreeing on the importance of providing stability for the kids. It was not always smooth sailing. There were moments of friction when we had different opinions on parenting decisions, but we learned to discuss things calmly, without letting old wounds dictate the conversation. One weekend, while Sarah and I were preparing for a backyard barbecue with the kids and some friends, Jessica texted me. She wanted to discuss an upcoming school event. I was hesitant at first, but I knew we had to keep the lines of communication open. When she arrived, I invited her to stay for a while, and she accepted. The barbecue was lively, With the kids running around and our friends chatting around the grill, Jessica hung back initially, unsure of her place in the mix. But Sarah engaged her in a friendly conversation, offering her a drink and finding common ground through the kids. By the end of the afternoon, Jessica seemed more relaxed, and she left with a smile on her face. That evening, as Sarah and I cleaned up the backyard, I realized how far we had all come. The anger and betrayal that had once consumed me had faded, replaced by gratitude for the new life I was building. Jessica and I were not meant to be together, but we could find a way to move forward for the sake of our children. As my relationship with Sarah grew stronger, I began to think seriously about the future. I could envision a life with her, one where we continued to support each other and create a stable, loving home. She was not just my partner, she was my best friend and confidant, and the kids had grown to love her too. The idea of a future with Sarah grew more certain with each passing day. She became not only a partner in my life, but also a source of stability and love for the kids. One evening, after the children were in bed and we were sitting on the porch sipping tea, I looked over at her and knew it was time. I asked her if she would spend the rest of her life with me. Her eyes lit up and she smiled, saying, "Absolutely, yes." The next few months flew by in a whirlwind of planning. We opted for a simple, intimate ceremony with close friends and family. The kids had special roles, and seeing them walk down the aisle made my heart swell with pride. I felt incredibly blessed to have found love again, this time with someone who truly respected and cherished me. After the wedding, we settled into our new life together, savoring the small moments, family dinners, movie nights, and lazy Sunday mornings. The kids continued to thrive, with Sarah as a loving stepmother who supported them through their ups and downs. Our new family dynamic was unique, but filled with warmth and understanding. Jessica, meanwhile, found her own path. She attended therapy, worked on herself, and repaired relationships that had been strained during her time with Rick. She acknowledged Sarah's positive role in the children's lives and even sent us a congratulatory card after our wedding. Our co-parenting relationship evolved, and while we would never be friends, we communicated respectfully for the sake of the kids. In the end, I understood that life rarely follows the script you expect. The pain Jessica's betrayal caused would always be a part of my past, but it no longer defined my future. My new chapter was filled with love, growth, and hope. With my wonderful wife by my side and two amazing kids to guide and protect, I knew that this journey, with all its twists and turns, had shaped me into the man I was always meant to be.